Okay, we just did this full business breakdown case study for Profit Mastery on Starbucks, and I wanted to just create a little video, just short and sweet and simple, walking through how I pulled all that together, kind of the steps involved, and a way to think about it when you're approaching your own business. So this is a Starbucks 10K, which is their annual report. Now you probably don't have something like this for your own business. It has a description of the company and all the risk factors, financial statements, management's discussion around their financial results, all sorts of good stuff in each of these. Every public company has a Form 10K. It's an informational document. So when I built the case study, I started with the qualitative details around the company, right? The business model, the profit model, how they make money, right? The unit economics. I kind of got into the descriptive elements of the business, right? And I get a lot of that from this Form 10K. You know, we are a roaster, marketer, retailer of coffee, right? And so they're doing more than just operating these stores and selling coffee. So this gave me some nitty gritty detail around the business. My point to you is that it probably would be helpful to sit down with pen and paper or type it out, whatever works best for you. This same level of narrative around your company, right? Here's what we do. Here's how we work. Here's the type of customer we serve and the revenue lines or channels that we're in. Having that descriptive element really helps you get some clarity around your business and what it is you do and who you're serving, right? The business model is the description of the customer problem that you are solving, right? Okay, so that's that. Management discussion and analysis. So you probably won't have something like this for your own company where they talk about everything that went on during the year, right? Here are the highlights for the year. Oh, revenue increased 1%, and operating income decreased to 5.4 billion, right? Here's all these disaggregated financial informations, right? Oh, okay, I can see the revenue from their company-owned stores and the revenue from their licensed stores to third parties. And later on, I can get the number of locations for each. No, I know it's in here somewhere. The number of locations for each of those channels, right? Maybe that's actually in the description area. Uh, Part of the management team. Here we go. Company-owned stores, right? Licensed stores, where they're located, all this detail. And these are really great KPIs. And you don't need to have it in a giant informational document like this, but I'm just saying gathering some of those pieces of information can be beneficial, right? So, okay, here it is. Company operated store, 21,000 stores as of September 29th, 2024. So I took this information, I took their financial information, and I dropped it into an Excel spreadsheet, technically a Google Sheets. This would be the raw financial data. I pull it from a source called Ticker, Tikr, for analyzing public companies. You could do something similar and pull your own financial information just like this, right? So this is multi-year income statement, a multi-year balance sheet, and a multi-year cash flow statement, right? Pull it all together. It's got a lot of information. It's got a lot going on. So this is kind of step one of gathering all that financial detail together. Step two, which I talk about in the case study, which we will have a PDF copy of that, so it's all in one readable document. But step two for financial statement analysis, I am an advocate that everyone should take their financial information that looks crazy like this and condense it and reformat it in a way that makes it readable. I'm a big fan of these vertical tables where you're kind of looking at the numbers scrolling down instead of across. I think if you've got, 5 or 6 buckets of financial info that you're looking at, this can be a really clean way to see it. It helps me spot trends really fast, right? Like this right here, I can see, oh, gross margins were 32% and fell to 26.8. That's a big decline, right? Oh, operating margins, they were 18, fell to 14. And okay, here's this weird anomaly. Oh, that's COVID, right? So I can kind of write that off right out of the gate. Um, so I like seeing it in this vertical format. But my point is, I took this big P&L and whittled it down to just sales, just gross profit, calculated a margin on that, just overhead, operating income, right? So gross profit minus overhead equals operating income, and then an operating margin. Okay, so I've got kind of the big picture view of the financial statements. I later wanted to understand, oh, beneath the surface, here's the economics between the company-owned stores and the licensed stores. So I kind of built this, here's the revenue that they're getting per store. You can see it's way lower for the licensed stores, even though there's almost an equal amount of stores, but it's probably higher margin, right? Because they're not running them. They don't have the labor and all the other things associated with it. Um, okay, here's where I gathered the info on their unit economics, right? I found, oh, okay, for every dollar of revenue, what percentage was going to product? What percentage was going to run the stores? What percentage went to overhead and then depreciation? And the sum of these should equal all of their costs, total expenses, right? So the difference was 100% minus these percentages total would get your operating margin, right? So everything's there. It's just a very condensed high level way of looking at it. But now, expressed as a percentage of revenue, I can get a clean look at, okay, for every dollar of sales or every $100 of sales, what's the margin, what's the model look like? And that's what I built right here, right? So for every $100 of sales or 100%, 32 is going to product, 41 to the store, total COGS, right? So there's my variable or my contribution margin or gross margin, another 8.4% to run this, or sorry, to run the whole company, and then 5% to have equipment and fixtures and real estate and all that other stuff. Did the same thing for the balance sheet. Very, very simple way of looking at the balance sheet. Off to the side here, I kind of did my own little scratch math on working capital ratios, and then down here I've got my cash flow statement, and then aggregates for it. I love to see the sum total where everything came in from and where everything went out to, and then understanding, okay, how are these guys spending their money, right? And I even called out in my write up that, oh, well, they spent $10 billion on buybacks in 2019, right? It's way more money than they made that year. And coincidentally, on the balance sheet, equity went negative that year, right? So they bought down all the equity in the business and flipped the balance sheet to have a bunch of debt and negative equity, right? So now the debt to equity ratio is virtually meaningless for this business. So you got to look at a different way to measure leverage. So step one was gather the financials. Step two is to reformat it, right? Get it in an easy to understand way. You could do this with monthly or quarterly numbers. You don't, if you have 10 years of data, that can be helpful. So then I've got that. Step three was to put this into a ratio scorecard. We talk about this in Profit Mastery all the time. It's a core part of the curriculum. This is the jumping off point for building out your financial strategy, right? So understanding where do you go next? What are you doing from here? This is where you'd say, all right, let's identify the trends here. And I mentioned 6 of them in the write up, the case study, to say, these are the 6 things that I think are relevant that this management team should drill deeper into and then build a plan to go fix. And then on the very last part of the case study, we talked about projections, and this is just a very, very simplistic projection exercise, right? I essentially extrapolated some revenue trends. I made an assumption that revenue growth would slow compared to what it had been doing in the past. Margins, you got to make an assumption around that. I just said, okay, well, let's just keep it flat and see what happens. Same for overhead. I just kept the percentage of sales flat, right? So right around 13%. And then that spit out a number for operating profit, which would basically be your profitability target from there. So these are just very, very simplistic ways of getting something on paper. Then if you had this in place, right? So let's just say you're 37 million instead of 37 billion. You could take this number and say, okay, yeah, let's just say our gross margins are the same as they were last year. You can validate those on your own, right? And say, oh, let's go look at your vendor invoices to say, yeah, okay, it really does cost us 73 cents to buy that thing. Then you've got this projection for overhead, 4.8 billion. From there, you could break that down to say, oh, okay, I've got 100 or 1 million, 1 billion, whatever in payroll, and then 2 billion in rent and facility costs, and another 1 billion in general overhead, right? So software, insurance, etc. Right? You can go disaggregate this 4.8 billion to see, what can I do to influence that number? Can I keep it? Can I keep it at 4.6 billion, or do I really need that extra 200 million to run the business this year? So that's a projection exercise. It's just to get something on paper and help you start thinking about what's going on in your business, what actions do you need to take from here. So that's a quick overview of this case study, which again will be packaged up in a nice, neat PDF where everything is in kind of one clean view. So thanks for reading. If you like the newsletter, uh, or like the case study, give us a follow, or sign up for the newsletter to keep these types of write-ups coming to your inbox.